An Inland Voyage by Robert Louis Stevenson. L'Affaire of Cursed Memory. We lingered in Moy a good part of the day, for we were fond of being philosophical, and scorned long journeys and early starts on principle. The place, moreover, invited to repose. People in elaborate shooting costumes sailed from the chateau with guns and game bags, and this was a pleasure in itself, to remain behind while these elegant pleasure-seekers took the first of the morning. In this way, all the world may be an aristocrat and play the duke among marquises and the reigning monarch among dukes, if he will only outvie them in tranquillity. An imperturbable demeanour comes from perfect patience. Quiet minds cannot be perplexed or frightened, but go on in fortune or misfortune at their own private pace, like a clock during a thunderstorm. We made a very short day of it to La Fère, but the dusk was falling, and the small rain had begun before we stowed the boats. La Fère is a fortified town in a plain, and has two belts of rampart. Between the first and the second extends a region of waste land and cultivated patches. Here and there along the wayside were posters forbidding trespass in the name of military engineering. At last, a second gateway admitted us to the town itself. Lighted windows looked gladsome. Whiffs of comfortable cookery came abroad upon the air. The town was full of the military reserve, out for the French autumn manoeuvres, and the reservists walked speedily and wore their formidable grey coats. It was a fine night to be within doors over dinner, and hear the rain upon the windows. The Cigarette and I could not sufficiently congratulate each other on the prospect, for we had been told there was a capital inn at La Fère. Such a dinner as we were going to eat, such beds as we were going to sleep in, and all the while the rain raining on houseless folk over the poplar countryside. It made our mouths water. The inn bore the name of some woodland animal, stag, or hart, or hind, I forget which, but I shall never forget how spacious and how eminently habitable it looked as we drew near. The carriage entry was lighted up, not by intention, but from the mere superfluity of fire and candle in the house. A rattle of many dishes came to our ears. We sighted a great field of tablecloth. The kitchen glowed like a forge and smelt like a garden of things to eat. Into this the inmost shrine and physiological heart of a hostelry, with all its furnaces in action and all its dressers charged with viands, you are now to suppose us making our triumphal entry. A pair of damp, rag and bone men, each with a limp India-rubber bag upon his arm. I do not believe I have a sound view of that kitchen. I saw it through a sort of glory, but it seemed to me crowded with the snowy caps of cookmen, who all turned round from their saucepans and looked at us with surprise. There was no doubt about the landlady, however. There she was, heading her army, a flushed, angry woman, full of affairs. Here I asked politely, too politely, thinks the Cigarette, if we could have beds. She surveying us coldly from the head to foot. "You will find beds in the supper," she remarked. "We are too busy for the like of you. If we could make an entrance, change our clothes, and order a bottle of wine, I felt sure we could put things right, so said I, if we cannot sleep, we may at least dine, and was for depositing my bag. What a terrible convulsion of nature was that which followed in the landlady's face! She made a run at us, and stamped her foot. "Out with you! Out of the door!" she screeched. "Sortez! Sortez! Sortez par la porte!" I do not know how it happened, but next moment we were out in the rain and darkness, and I was cursing before the carriage entry like a disappointed mendicant. Where were the boating men of Belgium? Where the judge and his good wines? And where the graces of Origny? Black, black was the night after the firelit kitchen, but what was that to the blackness in our heart? It was not the first time I have been refused a lodging. Often and often have I planned what I should do if such a misadventure happened to me again, and nothing is easier to plan. But to put into execution with the heart boiling at the indignity, try it only once, and tell me what you did. It is all very fine to talk about tramps and morality. 6 hours of police surveillance, such as I have had, or our brutal rejection from an inn-door, change your views upon the subject like a course of lectures. As long as you keep in the upper regions, with all the world bowing to you as you go, social arrangements have a very handsome air. But once get under the wheels, and you wish society were at the devil. I will give most respectable men a fortnight of such a life, and then I will offer them 2d. for what remains of their morality. For my part, when I was turned out of the Stag, or the Hind, or whatever it was, I would have set the Temple of Diana on fire, if it had been handy. There was no crime complete enough to express my disapproval of human institutions. As for the cigarette, I never knew a man so altered. "We have been taken for peddlers again," said he. "Good God, what it must be to be a peddler in reality!" He particularized a complaint for every joint in the landlady's body. Timon was a philanthropist alongside of him, and then, when he was at the top of his maledictory bent, he would suddenly break away and begin whimperingly to commiserate the poor. "I hope to God," he said, and I trust the prayer was answered, "that I shall never be uncivil to a peddler." Was this the imperturbable cigarette? This was he. Oh, change beyond report, thought, or belief! Meantime the heaven wept upon our heads, and the windows grew brighter as the night increased in darkness. We trudged in and out of La Fère streets. We saw shops and private houses where people were copiously dining. We saw stables where carters' nags had plenty of fodder and clean straw. We saw no end of reservists, who were very sorry for themselves this wet night. I doubt not, and yearned for their country homes. But had they not each man his place in La Fère barracks? And we, what had we? There seemed to be no other inn in the whole town. People gave us directions, which we followed as best we could, generally with the effect of bringing us out again upon the scene of our disgrace. We were very sad people indeed by the time we had gone all over La Fère, and the cigarette had already made up his mind to lie under a poplar and sup up a loaf of bread. But right at the other end, the house next the town gate was full of light and bustle. "Passant au registre leur appui" was the sign, à la Croix de Malte. There we were received. The room was full of noisy reservists, drinking and smoking, and we were very glad indeed when the drums and the bugles began to go about the streets, and one and all had to snatch shakos and be off for the barracks. Vasson was a tall man, running to fat, soft-spoken, with a delicate, gentle face. We asked him to share our wine, but he excused himself, having pledged reservist all day long. This was a very different type of workman innkeeper from the bawling disputations fellow at Origny. He also loved Paris, where he had worked as a decorative painter in his youth. There were such opportunities for self-instruction there, he said, and if any one has read Zola's description of the workman's marriage party visiting the Louvre, they would do well to have heard Bazin, by way of antidote. He had delighted in the museums in his youth. One sees there little miracles of work, he said. That is what makes a good workman. It kindles a spark. We asked him how he managed in La Fère. I am married, he said, and I have pretty children, but frankly it is no life at all. From morning to night I pledge a pack of good enough fellows who know nothing. It fared as the night went on, and the moon came out of the clouds. We sat in front of the door, talking softly with Bazin. At the guard-house opposite, the guard was being for ever turned out, as trains of field artillery kept clanking in out the night, or patrols or horsemen trotted by in their cloaks. Madame Bazin came out after a while. She was tired with her day's work, I suppose, and she nestled up to her husband and laid her head upon his breast. He had his arm about her and kept gently patting her on the shoulder. I think Bazin was right, as he was really married. Of how few people can the same be said. Little did the Bazins know how much they served us. We were charged for candles, for food and drink, and for the beds we slept in. But there was nothing in the bill for the husband's pleasant talk, nor for the pretty spectacle of their married life. And there was yet another item unchanged. For these people politeness really set us up again in our own esteem. We had a thirst for consideration. The sense of insult was still hot in our spirits, and civil usage seemed to restore us to our position in the world. How little we pay our way in life, although we have our purses continually in our hand. The better part of service goes still unrewarded, but I like to fancy that a grateful spirit gives as good as it gets. Perhaps the Bazins knew how much I liked them. Perhaps they also were healed of some slights by the thanks that I gave them in my manner. End of section 15. Recorded by Gabby Cowan.